For thousands of years, we were taught that civilization began in Europe. We were taught that advanced architecture, astronomy, and sacred monuments came from pale-skinned societies. But what if that story is incomplete? What if one of the oldest monumental sites on Earth was built by people who looked far more like early Africans than like modern Europeans? This is the story of Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe is located in what is now southeastern Turkey. It dates back to around 9,600 BCE. That makes it nearly 12,000 years old. Older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, older than farming itself. At the time Göbekli Tepe was built, there were no cities, no metal tools, no written language, no organized governments, and yet massive stone pillars were carved, moved, and arranged into precise circular structures, some weighing over 20,000 pounds, with animal carvings, with symbolic designs, with clear spiritual meaning. This site changed everything historians thought they knew about early humans. But the most important question is, who built it? 12,000 years ago, humanity had only recently spread out of Africa in evolutionary terms. Genetically speaking, modern humans outside Africa were still very close to their African ancestors. The genes responsible for very light European skin tones had not yet become widespread. Those genes only became common thousands of years later, mostly within the last 8,000 years. Göbekli Tepe existed before that transformation. The people who built it were early hunter-gatherers of the Near East. They were descendants of populations that had migrated out of Africa tens of thousands of years earlier. They were not white Europeans as we think of them today. They were early humanity, dark-haired, dark-eyed, likely darker skinned than later populations, closer in appearance to their African roots than to modern Northern Europeans. This is not speculation. This comes from genetic timelines and evolutionary science. At the time Göbekli Tepe was built, modern racial categories did not exist. There were no Europeans in the modern sense, no Middle Easterners as we define them today, no rigid racial divisions. There were only human populations adapting to new environments. Skin color changes slowly through natural selection. When people live in low sunlight regions for thousands of years, lighter skin becomes more common. But that takes time, and Göbekli Tepe comes from before that process was complete. It sits in a period when humans still looked much closer to their original African form, when nearly all of humanity was black. Göbekli Tepe also proves something even more revolutionary. It shows that advanced thinking came before agriculture, before farming, before cities, before kingdoms. These people were building sacred monuments while still living as hunter-gatherers. That means spiritual systems, symbolic thinking, and complex planning did not begin with later European civilizations. They began with early humanity, humanity that still carried Africa in its biology, humanity that had not yet been divided by modern racial labels. So why wasn't this taught in school? Why were we shown pictures of ancient builders that always looked pale? Because history has often been told from a European-centered perspective, a perspective that quietly suggests greatness started with whiteness. But the timeline tells a different story. Göbekli Tepe was built thousands of years before light skin became widespread in Eurasia. That matters. It means one of the earliest known monumental religious structures on Earth was created by dark-skinned early humans. That's right, by black people. Civilization did not begin with whiteness. It began with humanity, and humanity began in Africa. This is not about taking credit from anyone. It is about restoring the truth. Göbekli Tepe was built before Europe became genetically white-skinned, before racial categories hardened, before modern identities existed. The builders were early descendants of African migrants, living in a time when humanity still looked unified, before it was divided. History did not begin pale. It began dark. And from that darkness came architecture, astronomy, and sacred space. Göbekli Tepe is hidden black history. Please subscribe and like if you support the content.